In the hills above a small slate-grey town, a winding road reaches a shallow creek. Over the bubbling water, a rusting water wheel can be seen rising through the reeds. And as the road begins to creep higher into the mountains, turning to the left as it does so, a small track trails off to the right. At the end of it, an entrance into the hill leads to an ancient, forgotten, and buried hall, now the domain of a tribe of goblins plotting their next move. Hello adventurers, and welcome back to the Red Quills. My name is Ryan, and today we're going to be starting a new topic. In this series, we'll be unpacking the different maps that you need in order to create an adventure, and I'll be doing so using these three maps: a grid map, an isometric map of a town, and a setting or wilderness map. Between the three of them, I'll construct the concepts for an adventure in which a group of adventurers deal with a party of goblins, either through combat in the grid map or through diplomacy, finding clues that can be seen in the isometric and the wilderness maps. This video is the first in this series, and as we go through, what I'm going to be doing is releasing the adventures that can go along with these maps so that you can use them when you create your own, to give you context to how you can pull in the different details you can find in a town and expand them into an adventure. But what's more, as I mentioned in the last video, we've just reached 5,000 subscribers on the Red Quills, and I'm very happy about that. And as a thank you, what I'm going to be doing, in addition to releasing these adventure modules, is for my paid patrons releasing excerpts of a new atlas that can go with these particular adventures. In this case, an atlas excerpt about the town of Lunaris and about Lord Gladsvain's Hall, the setting for this particular adventure. Now, as you can see, what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin with an outline of the grid map. Now today, I'm going to be using different materials than I normally use. For this series of maps, I've gotten my hands on a new medium, which is acrylic paint pens. The description of that can be found below if you want to use them in your own, but it adds a pop of color and allows me to differentiate much more easily using the different colors so that it catches the eye. And in the case of the grid map, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to quickly sketch the outline in pencil and then draw the outline in the pens using different colors to really bring the focus of the players to what is relevant and away from what is irrelevant. After that, I'm going to move on to the wilderness and isometric map. The wilderness map will come first, and it won't take me very long to do the first layer, because when I'm working with the acrylic paints, what I want to do is give them time to dry before I come in with the detailed tools. In this case, fineliner pens of different sizes. So once I've finished using the acrylic paints to give it color, I'm going to move to the isometric map, which is going to be done entirely in fineliner pens of different thicknesses, in order to give the acrylic paint time to dry before I come back to it and add in the grid and the details. So let's talk about the different features of this map and how you can bring them in to your own maps. Now for this adventure, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break the adventure down into three distinct categories of interaction that the players can have. We've got combat, for which the grid map will do. We've got investigation and strategy, for which the wilderness map will give them some clues as to where they can go, and the isometric map, which we can use for roleplay purposes and exploration. In this particular case, what I want to do is give the players the option of either dealing with the goblins directly by killing them if they want to do that, or by finding out why the goblins are here, perhaps even by identifying or sympathizing with them, and finding clues about their motivations within the town before going to speak with them and try diplomacy, which of course in itself could always result in combat as well. Fantasy settings are never easy to navigate. So the town that I'm drawing now has all of the basic features that a fantasy town will have. When I draw it out, I make sure to add in labels as to the significant locations that they'll want to explore. For instance, the inns for which the various adventurers will want to stay, the castle, which is the focus of a lot of the roleplay with authority figures, any particular shops or goods merchants, for instance an apothecary, a forge, and even some other significant locations such as the local chapel or the local brothel, which is significant in the module that I've written. Now, while the isometric map of the town and the grid map of the hall both seem to have really obvious, really significant uses, I can understand if the wilderness map doesn't seem to stand out as much initially. Because while it does give you a significant insight into the layout of the hall and its context in the local area, it's not particularly helpful. But it is good for immersing your players in their expectation of what the hall looks like. And a part of the adventure is finding out that the goblins do indeed exist at all, that they're not some fairy tale told by merchants on the high road. When the players arrive in the location, which is where the creek crosses the road, and they can find a rusting water wheel to one side and the remains of tracks and ambush signs, they can follow the clues in the area to deducing precisely what happened, whether or not the attack was staged, whether the goblins were indeed the aggressors, or whether the merchant that they met in the beginning is actually lying to them. All of these can be deduced in the ambush site, which is what I've drawn. And so it provides context for the greater adventure, and because it's a focus in that way, the wilderness map does add a lot of insight that the players can use later on. Once I've finished adding the details onto the wilderness map, I can go through and add the grid to the hall itself. And I've given several different options for how combat, or indeed diplomacy, can play out in this particular adventure, but the hall itself is set up by me as the DM for a particular kind of encounter. It does give the impression of grandness and perhaps even intimidating the players if they rush in and find all of the goblins in one room, rather than being able to move slowly through a large, segregated warren. But the goblins also have different rooms in which the players can find traps or treasure or decoys at the beginning if they're a little arrogant and rush in. And of course there is an added danger, a secret second pocket in which the goblins store a much more dangerous foe that they use against interlopers, an ogre, which against level 1 players, which this is designed for, is a very great threat indeed. And so the hall itself contains a number of different dangers. The danger of the decoy, in which they don't feel that there is a danger whatsoever. The danger of the goblins themselves. The danger of diplomacy. The danger of the ogre, which is a higher level of combat difficulty that can add on later. And of course, the traps. And all of these together make for an experience which challenges them in different directions and makes diplomacy, perhaps, the most tempting option for them to take. And between the three of them, we've created the maps you need for this adventure. Lord Gladsvain's Hall sits in the hills above the town of Lunaris, and though these can be used in the context of any given world, it particularly works for the world that we're building in the Atlas, the proof of concept of which can be found on the Red Quill's Patreon, so you can take a look at it there. And when we're finished doing these adventure modules, I will upload the new additions to the Atlas, the ones that include the town of Lunaris and Lord Gladsvain's Hall, so that they can be added. And what's more, these points can already be found on the larger map of the Kingdom of Endon, which we made earlier in the year. As we go through with the other adventures, they can also be pointed out on this particular map, so you can track your players' movement through the local area. Now, the full adventure can be found on the Patreon if you want to use it, if you want to use these maps, if you want to apply the concepts to your own world, please take a look at the link in the description if you want to check that out. Of course, if you do want to support what I would do, I'd be very grateful. But any support, including even liking or commenting on this video, helps us to continue to grow. And that is all I will ask of you. In the description, I've left a list of materials that I've used for this video. If you want any more context, if you have any more questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments below. Or if you want to join the Red Quill's Discord, the link is also in the description. You can join on to the various forums that we have, and you can share your own map making ideas with a community of like-minded fantasy cartographers. For those that do join and become members of our Patreon, the additional lore and content, as well as the Atlas excerpts, will be available on the Patreon from this Sunday. And then they'll be released so that the adventures come out on Thursday, the additional lore and the Atlas excerpts come out on Sunday for the duration of this series, which should end around the end of January next year. So this was just a short video. Thank you for watching. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will catch you next week.